Hi, I'm Pastor Lanny Hayes from the Coteau Fellowship Church. I want to invite you to join us for church service on Sunday morning. We have Bible study at 9:30. Church service starts at 10:15, and we want you to come and worship with us. We believe that Jesus Christ is coming back soon. We believe in the power of God's Word, the power of the Holy Spirit, and we ask you to come and worship with us so you can enjoy the presence of the Lord and listen to the Word of God by faith. Thank you, and God bless you.
But I want to talk about a few things before we get into our topic today. Some of y'all were in Bible study, some of y'all were not, so I like to go back a little bit and explain a few things. Now, in chapter 22, there's actually a Psalms in Samuel. I did not know that until doing my Bible study or research, that there's actually a Psalms in the book of Samuel. And I didn't know that. That was interesting. Just like you read the book of Psalms, it's like you go in the middle of your Bible and you read a bunch of Psalms or songs that David wrote. Well, he actually, in chapter 22, is actually a song that God allowed him, or whoever wrote the book of Samuel, to put a song in there. So that was interesting. It's actually close, I think, to Psalms 18. It's very similar to it. So a few little changes here and there. But so that's pretty interesting. I did not know that. You see, as I'm teaching y'all, I'm learning as well. I did not know that. I've been in church for years, and I didn't even know that there was a Psalms in the book of Samuel. So that's amazing. So I did not know that. It's really amazing. And in this Psalm, in chapter 22, what David is saying, he's giving thanks to God in chapter 22. He's like, hey, Lord, you protected me. You saved me from King Saul when my back was against the wall and everything was going against me. You protected me. You sheltered me. You kept me safe from my enemies. And he uses what I like about in chapter 22. He uses symbols, or he uses we call symbols or metaphors. Like he's using a strong tower. He's using the horn of my great salvation. He's using all these symbols to let the reader know, like these things are strong. These things are powerful, like a strong tower or a fortress or a horn of my salvation. He's using all these things to point you to God. These things are strong. Just like you have faith in these things to protect you. Just like you go behind a shield. Back in the day, they had shields and stuff. Just like you went behind a shield to protect you from arrows, from the enemy's arrows, and you trusted in these fortresses. You trusted in all these things, so you should trust in God. Just like these things are strong, like these things are, you could put your faith in them to guide you or protect you, so God can do the same. So that's what I like about chapter 22, that he's using these things to show you that as a future Christian or a person who follows God, you can trust in these fortresses, and that is God. So that's what I like about in chapter 22. So that's what chapter 22 is all about. He's thanking God. He's glorifying God for protecting him and giving him strength to all the things he's going through. And he's also using these things as a symbol. He said, just like the tower is a strong tower you can run to from the enemy, so God is your strong tower, if that makes any sense. So that's what chapter 22 is all about. That's his purpose of writing chapter 22. But in chapter 23, it's his last words. And some people believe it was a song as well. It was a Psalms as well. So there's actually a possibility there's actually maybe two songs in the book of Samuel. But in here, he's given his last words. He's overlooking his life. He's overlooking at the things that God did for him, just like he did in the other chapter. He's saying how God protected him and he's overlooking his life. And he's like, I didn't do everything perfect. David admits to that. I did not do everything perfect. But the things I did do right, I did good. So that's why and then now we're going to come to chapter 8 pretty soon. But remember, your last words, other than salvation, or other than marriage or salvation in your life or whatever the case, the most important thing in your life, other than those two, is your last words. Your last words before you leave this earth. It will determine who you are, what your worldview is, how you view everything. And, the other day, we were watching, we were talking, they were showing actors when they died, most of the old actors, but some new ones. They were talking about their last words before they died. And it was amazing the things that they said in their last words. Some things I cannot repeat on here because it's not very, very decent for a church. That's all I can say. But it just to show you their heart was at. They had one, she hated God. Her last death. It's hard to believe, but she mocked God. That was her last words, of mocking God and saying the D word and God knows what else she was saying. But it just to show you her heart was. And now she left a legacy. Yeah, maybe she was a great actor or whatever, but she left a legacy of like, I didn't have no peace. I didn't have a relationship with God. I'm a miserable human being. So part of a legacy that she left. So your last words does determine how you lived your life and what you're going to leave behind to people. So that makes sense. So that's what David's doing. David wrote in here that he wrote his last words of a testament, we call that, where he's leaving his last mark on human beings or human history. Now, we're going to talk about verse 8, David's mighty men. Now, I'm going to give you all a little secret. I love a lot of Bible stories in the Bible, but this is actually one of my favorite. Is David's mighty men, and I'm explain why for a few minutes. But you got to understand about David's mighty men, and I'm going to explain their background and stuff. But one thing I want to make sure about David's mighty men, you're going to see them do some great things. Some great, we will call human strength or human abilities. If you read this, it's almost like you be reading about superheroes, pretty much. It's like almost you be reading like something like what Superman would have done or these other heroes. But the only difference is their strength came from God. Their strength did not come from a planet or they didn't come from like Captain America, for example, where they put something in him and he had his strength, But other words, these men had their strength from God. If you look at Samson and you look at a lot of these individuals, the Holy Spirit came upon them and they did great and mighty things for God. Impossible odds. And we're going to read in here, these men did some great impossible odds, but with God, all things are possible because they trusted in God to overcome these things. And one of the things I want to talk about these mighty men, I think it's very important that we have to go back a little bit. I don't know if some of y'all remember, but the cave of Adullam, when David was running away from King Saul, when King Saul was jealous of David, he was hunting him down like an animal. He was scared that David was going to take his throne. And you remember, David was chosen by God, but King Saul was chosen by the people. That's a big difference. Saul represents the flesh. He represents something I got to hold on to, something that he created. But David was chosen by God. You see, in David's time, and David believed, hey, in God's timing, God and his divine providence, God will make me king when his time. But King Saul, like a lot of people, he took things in his own hands. And he represents the flesh. He represents, there's something, my throne, I don't want no one taking my throne from me. This is mine, this is it. This is for me and my family. Instead of letting God do the work, he was letting himself do the work. He was letting the flesh do the work, if that makes any sense. So David represents the spirit side of things. I wait on God. I wait on God's timing to open doors. When it's his timing, it's going to happen. But King Saul was like, no, I got to make it happen. This is it. This is for me, and I'm going to make sure it stays with me, and I'm going to make it happen. So that's the kind of world we live in. We have some that make things happen, fleshly-wise, and there's some that say, here, I'm going to wait on God. I'm going to wait and be patient and wait for God to open the door. So David, that's what I learned a lot from David, that David waited for the door to be open. He did not make it happen. He did not make a tunnel. He did not blast his way into things. He let God do the work, if that makes any sense. So that's one thing I liked about David. And the thing about David's mighty men, that in the cave of Adullam, when he was running away from Saul, these guys came to him. They were bankrupt. They were uncontent. Sound like a lot of church people, huh? Or sound like a lot of people you know. They were bankrupt and discontent. Anything you can think of human misery, they had it. Let's just put it this way. So, but David saw something in these men. Yeah, they weren't warriors. We don't know what they were. They maybe were farmers. They were maybe, we don't know, but they weren't warriors. They did not go to military academy. Let's put it this way. They were not trained in military style. They were just regular people like you and me. But David saw something in these men. David said, yes, these men are bankrupt. Yes, these men have issues, as we will call today. But he saw something in them. He says, I can take these men and I can make something out of them. It's the same thing what Christ does with us. In human potential or in human capabilities, we don't mean much to some people. But Christ sees something in us. Our David, our Jesus sees something in us. He says, I see bankruptcy. I see misery. I see, something that most men won't take time with. But I can take time with these men or these women of God, and I can make a warrior out of them. If they just trust me and they obey me, I can make a fighter out of them, And so that's the same thing with us. Our David does that for us, our Jesus. When other people gave up on us, when other people think you weren't the favorite child in the group, you weren't the favorite, whatever, God saw something in you. It's like David. Another reason why David can relate to these mighty men, society looked down on him. Did you know people looked down on David? Think about it. When Prophet Samuel, when he came to anoint the next king of Israel, Jesse brought all his boys out, and he's like, if these are all your kids, he said, there's the youngest one, he's in the field, he's not much. He's a scrappy little fella. He's not really, not this boy. No, he's a king. He got the kingly look. He got the big shoulders, he looks like he could take on a giant. Look at him, But God saw something in David. He saw a warrior inside of David. He knew David was out there playing his music. He knew David was been in training and loved God and been in training. God knew what he could do. So that's why I believe David can relate to these men. Because he said, just like people looked at me like I was a nothing, but God made a warrior out of me. God made a soldier out of me. I'm going to make a soldier out of them. So that's pretty interesting about David's mighty men. And that can apply to us, spiritual warfare. Because these men, when we're going to read, and they got some weird names now. Believe me or not, when I read all this, I said, thank God for Boogie. Yeah. Reading all these names, I'm like, oh, Lord, thank God for Boogie. I appreciated my name more when I read all this. I'm like, man, the names they got up in here, Lord, thank God, man. Oof. I thought Boogie was bad. When I read all those names, I'm like, well, it's not too bad as I thought, So you will see some weird names in there. But I want to take it to us, though, spiritual warfare. Now, the Bible says that we take the full armor of God and we fight against the devil and his demons. Spiritually speaking, you fight with things. Just like we're going to read in here. Like, for example, the children of Israel, they're going to be fighting in the bean field to protect their beans because the Philistines are coming to snatch their food from them and when they harvest it, they take their food. We're going to read that up in here. But spiritually speaking, that the devil does the same thing with us. We have lions, we have people, we have, spiritually speaking, we have Philistines that come and try to take our goods. They try to take the things that God gave us. They try to take your family. They try to take your loved ones. The devil tries and his demons, they try to take all the blessings that God has given you. In other words, the devil comes and tries to take your bean field, if that makes any sense. And he tries to take what God has given you and God is blessing you. But like we're going to read in here, there was somebody who defended his bean field. So spiritually speaking, like these mighty men, you have to put on your armor and you got to fight the devil out there. You got to fight his minions. You got to fight what belongs to you. And with the strength of God and God's promises, you can fight these enemies that you face. It could be fear. It could be doubt. It could be drug addiction. It could be drinking. It could be whatever that bounds you up. You got to fight those things, but you can't do it on your own strength. Just like these men, they didn't base their own strength. They base it on God's strength, supernatural strength from God. So it's the same thing with you. Yeah, you might not be fighting physical Philistines. They're not there no more. You might not fight a lion, physically speaking. You might not fight a giant like David did. But fortunately, you got giants, you got lions, you have Philistines, spiritually speaking, attacking you. And just like these mighty men put their faith in God to fight all these things, these elements, these things, so God will give you the strength to fight your battles, if that makes any sense. And another thing I want to point out is that they believe in David's vision. In other words, when they followed David, they did not contradict David. Another reason why I believe they became mighty men, yeah, God helped them and God gave them strength, but they believed in David, just like they believed in God. They believed in David's vision. They believed that when they did not contradict David. I'm not saying they had their days where they probably had disagreements and stuff, but the vision that David had, they believed in. And a lot of times when you're having united church, most of the time, or you're having united people, is when they go to the vision that God has placed on the leader. If you have a bunch of, like Moses would have done even better if the people would have had the same vision as Moses. They were not great. They were maybe not complain as much if they had the vision that God gave Moses. If they had the vision that he had, things would have maybe went a lot better. Because Joshua and Caleb did. When the other people come to the land, they said, oh, there's too much giants. There's too much obstacles in the way. We can't take that land. Joshua and Caleb said, they're like grasshoppers. They're like little ants. We can take them. Compared to God, I mean, they're big to us, but compared to God, there's some little midgets compared to God, you know? So they followed Moses' vision. They had the same spirit as Moses. They had the same faith as Moses. So same thing as David. They believed in David. You know, if you watch a lot of ministries, you know, if you look at preachers and teachers really well, you can tell who they listen to, or you can tell who trained them, because you can just tell the way that person's been under, because it does manifest on you. In other words, it does come back to you. The person who preached to you, the person who teaches to you, you will acknowledge what you've been learned. So it's the same thing with David's mighty men. They saw David, what he did things. They saw how he trained them. And they actually picked up his spirit. They picked up what he taught them. And so just like you're going to read, I think in the end, they were giant killers. David was a giant killer. So in other words, a lot of things David did, they did, and maybe even better. You know, Jesus said that. Jesus says, I'll go away, but you will do mighty and greater things than I will. You see, you follow Jesus, you follow your heavenly David, you do what he says, and then you might even do things better because you follow him. So very interesting that I learned, and we're going to learn more stuff as we go along. Finally, we're going to read, I think. Okay. So these are the names of the mighty men whom David had. Forgive me if I butcher these names, but Joash, Chashemite, the Tishmite, the chief among the captains, he was called Dodo, the Ezraite, because he had killed 800 men at one time, and after him was Elzar, the son of Dodo. He was Dodo. Okay. If you think of the dodo bird, that's, it'll come back to that, The Horite, thank you. Whew. One of the three mighty men who David, when he defeated the Philistines, when they were gathered there for battle, and the men of Israel have retreated. It don't give much detail of what happened, but I like the other ones. It gives more detail. He rose and attacked the Philistines until his hand was withered, and he had hand stuck to his sword. The Lord brought about a great victory that day, and the people returned after him only to plunder. Now, they say, we're going to stop here for a second. They say that back in those days, you got to understand, there was no machine guns. There was no weapons like we have today. We have quick weapons that can kill instantly. Back then, it was hand-to-hand combat. No matter if it was a small skirmish or a big skirmish. Mostly if it was a big war. Mostly it was a big fight. You were probably out there for a couple of hours if the enemy did get you. If you were still on your feet and you still had enough strength, you were fighting through the whole battle. So it was a continued battle. It was, one after another, mostly if it's a big battle. So a lot of times these men, they will hold the sword for so long, we would call it today, they would actually cramp their fingers where they couldn't actually move it. Matter of fact, and they said that the only way they could do it was put warm water back in those days to uncramp the muscles. So that's how warfare was so tense back then. And the reason why I know that, because one day I was actually, was it last week at work? I was not weed eating, but I was using a trimmer on the edge of the cement where grass grows over it, and you got to trim. So I was weed eating so much that I noticed my hands actually cramped on me, and I couldn't actually move them for a little while. So by God's grace, I did. But it's just to show you that that is possible, that you're so much doing your work, or back in the day they were fighting so much that your hands can crip, if that makes any sense. So this is true. That could happen. That's not fairy tale. You know, if you're not careful and you're working, or you're so much into your work that you got to be careful that your hands don't get locked up. So that's what it was. He fought so much that he couldn't even let go of his sword. That's how tense the battle was. So that's interesting. Let's go to verse 11. And after him was Shema, the son of Agor, the Hittite. Lord have mercy. Bless you. The Philistines gathered together into a troop where there was a piece of ground full of lentils. Lentils back then, that was beans. So by the way, that was a bean field. So the people fled from the Philistines, but he stand himself in the middle of the field, defending it, and killed the Philistines. So the Lord brought about a great victory. Remember I told you earlier, spiritually speaking, you have a bean field, and the devil wants to take your bean field. He wants to take the things God bless you with, and so you got to defend your ground. You have to defend the things that God gave you. And another thing, too, about the Philistines, Satan, this is a symbol of Satan. The Philistines were real crafty. What they would do was they would wait until everything was harvest. They would wait until like they had storehouses. They wait until all the work was done, and they would come and take the food. It was kind of, I was watching, a movie I was watching one day where a guy says, they're digging up all the gold. He says, let them dig it. Let them do all the work, and when they come up here, we rob it. So that's what they did. They were like, hey, let them do all the work, the hard work, and when everything's done, we'll just come and take it. So that's kind of like the devil does. You know, the devil comes and you sweat and you work hard, and the devil wants to come and take everything from you, spiritually and physically. He tries to take your finances. He tries to take your spiritual stuff, and he tries to rob it from you. But you got to stand your ground and defend what is yours. So that's what he did. He defended what was his. And another thing, too, this was a small task. Think about it. This was not a big job, in a way speaking. This is not one of your best top general jobs. You're not going to get a medal for what you did, in a way speaking, with this story. But you know, he did something small to gain something big. You know, like David. Before David fought a giant, he had to kill a lion first. He had to kill a bear first. He had to take care of sheep before he took care of people. So in other words, God gave him the small things to see how he was going to handle it. And if he handled it in faith and he did great with it, then God was going to upgrade him. God was like, okay, you did the small things. Now I'm going to give you bigger things. You know, it's the same thing when you're in church or you're in ministry a lot of times. You know, a lot of times God will give you the small things to do, you know. And then when God says, if you're faithful in those small things, I will grant you bigger things. So this is what the situation what happened to him. He did the small things. He fought a small skirmish. He defended the ground. And then my understanding was he actually came one of David's mighty men. We hear about him today. And I think he came a general or something like that, or a bodyguard. So in other words, God made him small things, but God gave him the big things. So remember, sometimes you're like, because us Americans, we want the big things first. In other words, we want the horse before the cart. In other words, you know, we want, you know, we want the big things before the little things. But God's way is different. He says, I'll give you the small things to see what you can handle first. Then I'll upgrade you. Then you'll graduate to the big things. So that's what happened with him. God gave him a small victory, and he handled it real well. And then God rewarded him. He took care of that, and God upgraded him. So think about that next time when you're like, Lord, I'm not a singer, I'm not a preacher, I'm not a big person on television. Well, who knows? Sometimes God gives you the small things before you get to the big things. So everyone got to start from the bottom. It depends how faithful you are. Then 13. The 3 of the 30 chief men went down at harvest time and came to David at the cave of Abdullah. The troop of the Philistines encamped in the valley of Ramah. David was then in the stronghold in the garrisons of the Philistines, and then in Bethlehem. And David said with longing, "Oh, that someone will give me a drink of the water from the well of Bethlehem, which is the gate." So the 3 mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines and drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate. And he took it and he brought it to David. Nevertheless, he did not drink it, but poured it out before the Lord. And he said, "For it be from me, O Lord, that I do this. This is not the blood of the men who went in jeopardy of their lives. Therefore, he would not drink it." These things were done by the 3 mighty men. Now, let me kind of explain a few things here that's pretty interesting that compares to us. You see, these men loved David so much. They were a mentor to David. This is somebody they looked up to. This is somebody spiritually and physically. He guided them. He strengthened them. He helped them how to fight. He was like a father to them, kind of speaking. And they loved David so much that when David said, "Oh, if I can only drink a cool, fresh spring water from Bethlehem." You know, from my childhood, I remember when I used to tend the sheep and I would come back home from the fields and I would go to the town of Bethlehem, and there was that nice well right there. It was cool and it was awesome. It had a great taste, and how I loved it. I talked to people there. I had great memories there when I was around that well. And only if I can just go back to that well, only if I can just go back to that memory. And those men, they loved David so much, they said, "We're going to fulfill his wishes." And so they risked their life and they broke through a garrison, a Philistine garrison that was by, the town of Bethlehem, and they drew water out. You know, it's kind of like us, spiritually speaking. When our David wants something, we fulfill his wishes. When he desires something, we should go out there and fight the battles and give Christ his wishes. And, they say back in the day when in royalty, the servants was always ready, like the maids and the servants, when a king or a prince, because he can wave his hand anytime like this, and they were ready. They were ready to serve their master. Every time their master would call, they were always alert. They were always ready to make a sacrifice and give to their masters. The same thing with Jesus. When our Jesus wish something, our Lord says something, we should obey him, and we should do it out of love like these men did and do his wishes, if that makes any sense. So I want to bring that out. I think that's very important. Now, 18. Now, help me out now. Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zulash, the chief of another 3, he lifted up his spear against 300 men and killed them, and won a name among the 3. Kind of sound like Samson a little bit, huh? Was he not the most honored of the 3? Therefore, he became their captain. However, he did not attend to the first 3. Now, this guy, I think this is the one I like. Benaiah, the son of Zevash, the son of a mighty man from Gilzal, who had done many deeds. He had killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab, and he also had gone down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. And he killed an Egyptian, a statue man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, so he went down to him with a staff and wasted the spear out of the Egyptian's hands and killed him with his own spear. These things that Barash, the son of Jerah, did, and won a name among the mighty men. Now, think about this story here. He kills a lion on a snowy day. Now, what does the Bible say? There, 2 lions represent 2 things in the Bible. One, they represent Judah, the tribe of Judah, but a lion also represents the devil. So it's amazing how he went on a snowy day and he killed a lion that could represent the devil. A lot of times the devil's like a roaring lion seeking who he may devour. So sometimes the devil will come to you, but sometimes you got to take the fight to him sometimes. You got to conquer his territory sometimes. So that's what he did. He went out there, he conquered Satan's territory. That's interesting. And he said he fought, what they said, he fought like some Moab, guys from Moab. They look lion like. Another example of the devil, you know. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like the Egyptian and these men, they might have been giants. And imagine this now. This is what I think would happen with the Egyptian. Because you notice he said he had a staff in his hand. This is what I think probably happened. He probably took his staff, knocked him out, made him some couple of stars in his head, probably got him dizzy, and then he took a spear and killed him. That kind of sounded a little bit of what David did. You know, when David shot that slingshot, he shot it at Goliath. He didn't kill Goliath right away. People don't realize that. He just made him dizzy, or he collapsed him. And then he wanted to make sure he was dead. He took a sword and cut off his head. So that's what I think he's kind of doing, kind of similar like that, you know. So it's amazing how they followed David. And there's a little difference, but they followed David and his wars type stuff. So that's amazing. Let's see. He was more honorable than the 30th, but he did not attend the first there. And David appointed him over his guard. In other words, he became a bodyguard, or he protected the king. Abijah, the brother of Joab, was one of the 30. Edomon, the son of Dudu of Bethlehem. Now, I want to talk about this Dudu thing. Dodo or Dudu, whatever. I found out that's actually a nickname for David. That's like my name's Anthony, but they call my nickname's Boogie. Well, that's how they did. That's actually a nickname for David. I did not know that. So if you call somebody a Dudu or Dodo, if you're in Israel, it will be a great honor in Israel, not over here. Like you would think of like Dudu, I mean, go to the bathroom, you know. That's the first thing we would think if we were here. Yeah, or dodo crazy, right? That's how we were, a dodo bird, yeah? We'll take it as an insult one way or another over here. But they say if you go to Israel and you call somebody that, they will think, oh, wow, you gave me a good name. So if you ever go to Israel, you'll call someone, think of it as not as an insult, but yeah, of course y'all can't, most of y'all are going to be like me, y'all can't go nowhere. So anyway, so that's interesting. So Shemhai, was that? Yeah, go ahead, say the names. Yeah.
The Peletite, and Ira, the son of Ikakish.
Okay, we will stop there. But I want to say something, though. I want to point to... Yeah, I was about to say that. 38. Uriah the Hittite. Now, that was the last one. The reason why I believe David put that in there, for two reasons. One, he's reminding you of where all his trouble began, when he messed around with his wife and he killed this great man. And David put it, and God allowed him to put in there as David's mighty men and he was actually one of David's mighty men. So that's amazing how you learn about these mighty men and the things they achieve, and you imagine how you can place that in your life. You know, these are models for your life. You know, these men achieve, David and these men achieve great things, so you can achieve great things. And like I heard a preacher say, and he's right, he said, you notice King Saul never killed a giant. None of his people that followed him, they never killed giants. They did some great things, but they never accomplished like what David and his mighty men did. Because the reason why they hanged around David, they hanged around a giant killer. So it's kind of like us, spiritually speaking. We got to hang around with giant killers, not people who are low in faith, people who don't believe that God can't do nothing today. You know, you got to be with people who believe, hey, yeah, God is powerful, all-powerful, and that obstacle might be big to you, but to me and God is small, because God is with me. Who can be against me? So you got to be around those people. I call them giant killers. You got to be around giant killers, great people of faith who, you know, like Jesus said about that mountain, when he says that mountain be removed, and it will be removed through faith. So sometimes, you know, you got to be a mountain mover and a giant killer. Things that look big to you or to others, but to God it's not. And maybe even not to you when you see it through God's lens. See, like, take example, and now I'm almost done. When the children of Israel looked at King Saul, they were not looking it through the lens of God. They were looking at through their own lens. Wow, this guy is big. This guy is huge. Yeah, but David saw it through God's lens. He saw the way God looked at it. He said, yeah, to you he's big. Yeah, to you he can break you in pieces. But to me and God, because God is with me, both of us see him as a little ant. So he saw it to God's lens. That's why, another reason why David could fight that giant like he did, like Caleb and Joshua. They saw it through God's lens. They didn't look at it a human perspective. They saw it from God's perspective. So when you look at things in God's perspective and not your human capabilities, you see a lot more things different and than others.